That amendment brought by the ANC that until a ceasefire is agreed to by Israel and keeps to UN-facilitated negotiations. And as we saw there, that led to quite a bit of debate and discussion in the National Assembly.
And of course, we are going to then be monitoring this and taking you back in 5 minutes as a division has now been called, and we will take you back to the National Assembly. And of course, we've been hearing from different members of Parliament, Iman, and you listened to Phemi Majodina, the Chief Whip of the ANC, saying that you're calling for negotiations, and you're saying that negotiations are important, but how do we negotiate if women are still being killed, if the war continues and there is no ceasefire? How do we begin to do that?
A lot of debate on not only that point, but also on the position of the DA, the ACDP and the Freedom Front Plus. And you heard a representative MP, Sheikh Imam from the NFP, sharing their views quite strongly. And it will be interesting to see also whether they make any retorts, or they retort to what he said, particularly on the issue of where they get some of their funding from. And we will circle back to some of these big issues. I think you're going to have a bit of a discussion about this now.
And definitely as we talk about this, one of the big issues, of course, looking at the fact that, it also came up in Parliament this afternoon. Should South Africa cut ties completely as a part of this particular motion that has been brought in? But I do understand that our guests are now ready to have our conversation this afternoon. That's Professor Garth le Pere from the University of Pretoria, and is also Senior Associate at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, as well as Philani Mthembu, who is joining us as the Executive Director at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Let me thank you both for your patience as we are watching what is unfolding in the National Assembly. I'll start with you, Philani. Your thoughts on what we heard so far?
Well, I think one thing that is definitely clear, and we've seen in the past year as a trend within South African, the domestic landscape, is we've definitely seen an elevation of international relations issues amongst the various political parties, both the governing party but also opposition parties. And in this matter, we're definitely seeing a growing interest and a more proactive parliamentary diplomacy at play. So we're really seeing Parliament playing a role in shaping the national discourse when it comes to foreign policy issues. I think what's interesting is obviously there's differences around whether South Africa should cut diplomatic relations with the State of Israel, and what implications that might have for the two countries, but also what implications this might have for South Africa's ability to continue to extend solidarity with Palestine. So there's a difference around tactical issues. Where you don't necessarily see a difference is on what is actually happening on the ground, which is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, where we've seen obviously thousands of people die, over 10,000, and a lot of those being women and children. And I think what we're seeing is the limitations of diplomacy, especially when it comes to South Africa's relations with Israel. A last thing I think is, whilst it's clear that there's definitely a building majority towards either further downgrade or a complete cutting of diplomatic relations between South Africa and Israel, is you are also definitely seeing that South Africa is using other fora such as BRICS, but also other fora where it will seek to lobby, I think, the international community to put additional pressure on the State of Israel.
And Prof, listening to, of course, what the MPs had to say, the FF Plus, for example, saying if there was ever a time to keep negotiations open, it is now. And listening to the Democratic Alliance, they say the embassy in Ramallah will now not be able to function. The ANC is scoring its own goal. I wonder, what are your thoughts on some of these arguments?
Well, I essentially take the position that very much conforms to the original motion of the EFF. And that is unequivocally, to shut down the embassy and close diplomatic relations with Israel. And that
Prof,
position
Prof, please pardon me, my apologies. I'm going to ask us to continue with what you're saying in just a moment, but I do understand that the House has convened for a vote. Let's take you back to the National Assembly.
Honourable members, the Speaker has determined that in accordance with the rules, a manual voting procedure will be used for this division. In order to establish a quorum, I would request the table to confirm that we have the requisite number of members physically present in the chamber and on the virtual platform to take this decision. Party whips will then be given an opportunity to confirm the number of their members present and indicate if they vote for or against the question. Order, honourable members. There's members who's not paying attention. They're simply continuing with their discussions. A member who wishes to abstain or vote against the party vote may do so by informing the chairperson. Having confirmed that we have the requisite quorum, we will now proceed. The question before the House is that the amendment to the motion on the order paper, as moved by the Chief Whip of the majority party, be agreed to. Voting will now commence and the chamber doors will remain locked and members are not allowed to enter the virtual platform until voting is concluded. I'll now call on the whips to confirm the number of members in their parties present in the chamber and on the virtual platform and indicate if they vote for or against the question. I now recognize the Chief Whip of the majority party.
Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, the ANC in physical attendance here were 43. On the virtual platform, we are 157, which totals up to 190. Voting in full support. Thank you.
No, I think the total is 200.
No, total is 200.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The DA?
House Chair, in the House, we have 10 members. Online, we've got 57 members, totaling to 67 voting against the amended motion.
Again, the amendments. The EFF?
Asbonge Chair, 30 on the platform, 13 in the House, 43 in total, voting in favor.
Thank you. The FF Plus? Sorry, the IFP. My apologies.
Thank you very much, Chair. We are 7 on virtual, and I'd just like to bring to the attention of the table that Honourable Sabisa is registered as Sabisa and not under IFP. So that makes it 7, 4 in the House voting no. 11 total.
The FF Plus.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. We are 2 members in the House, 7 on the platform, 9 votes voting against.
The ACDP.
Thank you, House Chair. We 3 on the platform, 1 in the House, voting against. I'm Israel Chai.
The UDM. ATM.
Thank you, House Chair. We are 2 on the virtual. We are voting for. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. The NFP.
1 in the House in support. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. AIC. COPE. PAC.
1 in virtual platform voting in favor.
Al-Jama.
House Chair, we are 1 on the virtual platform and we vote in favor, and we want to know whether you were informed.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
They voted differently.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order, Honourable Members. Order, Honourable Members. Is there any member that wishes to abstain or vote differently to their party? Is there any member? None? Thank you. The voting session is now closed.
This is what we should have done on the land issue.
Order, Honourable Members. Order. Honourable Members, the outcome of the division is as follows. There's no abstentions. There's 91 that voted against the amendment and 248 voted in favour. The amendment is agreed to. Order, honorable members. Order. We're not done yet. We're not done yet. Order. I now put the motion as amended. Are there any objections?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, honorable member.
Yes, Chairperson. Objection. We also call for a division again. Thank you.
There's objections and a division having been called.
All right, so a 2-minute break there for that division, and we will bring you the results of that as soon as we are told they're ready to deliver it. And you are continuing this discussion, though, with your professors online. Well, let's get a view then from Garth.
Yeah, and I think we just need to go back and just get a quick view then from Professor Garth le Pere as we then continue our discussion. Hopefully we get to, just have as much as we possibly can while there's a break. Prof, we were talking about your thoughts then on what we've heard so far, as we now know there's this 2-minute break, but let's utilize that and get a sense from you. What do you say then to what the DA and the FF Plus had said, as I mentioned to you a little earlier on?
Well, politics, especially parliamentary politics, is the art of the possible. And I think, there was always going to be the pressure to find some kind of middle road and a modus vivendi vis-a-vis the EFF motion. But I was saying, that my position on the conflict is really informed by my own experience. When I was a part of the South African observer mission to the 2006 elections in the West Bank and Gaza, and I was assigned to 3 cities, quite large towns in the West Bank, Nablus, Jenin, and Tulkam. And there I came face to face with the brutality of the occupation. The daily humiliation that Palestinians have to suffer, and then also seeing some of the collateral damage of occupation with regard to the displacement of Palestinians, the demolition of homes, the destruction of their agricultural lands, the forced displacements, the detentions without trial, so reminiscent, really, of what happened in this country during apartheid, but multiplied in its ferocity and intensity. That experience really had made a lasting impression on my views on this conflict, so much so I wrote an article in the Sunday Times, more or less saying what the EFF motion called for. The unequivocal breaking off of diplomatic relations with Israel and closing of its embassy.
Yeah.
If you look at the current context, and I think, this debate in Parliament is kind of devoid of the contextual considerations.
And Prof, pardon me, again, my apologies. I'm going to have to stop you just for a second as we go back to Parliament. And I want us to stay when we come back with your recollections. Let's take you to the National Assembly.
Platform until voting is completed. The whips will now confirm the number of the members present in the chamber and on the virtual platform, and also indicate if they vote for or against the question. The ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. The ANC in the chamber, 43. The ANC on the virtual platform, 157. Total 200. We vote in full support. Thank you.
Thank you. The DA.
There are 10 members on the House Chair, and there are 57 online, 67 in total voting against.
The EFF.
Thank you, House Chair. 30 on the virtual platform, 13 inside the House. We vote in favor of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. The IFP.
Chairperson, 7 on virtual, 4 in the House, 11 voting against.
The FF Plus.
Thank you, Chairperson. 2 in the House, 7 on the platform, 9 votes voting against.
The ACDP.
Thank you, House Chair. 3 on the platform, 1 in the House, voting against. I'm
the UDM. The ATM.
Thank you, House Chair. 2 on the virtual platform. We vote in favor of the motion.
Good. The NFP.
Thank you, Chairperson. 1 in the House and in support. Thank you.
The AIC. COPE. The PAC.
PAC Chair, 1 and voting in favor.
Al Jama.
1 on virtual, we vote in favor.
Thank you. Honourable members, is there any member in the House or on the virtual platform that wish to abstain or vote differently to their party? There's none. Thank you. The voting session is now closed. Honourable members, the outcome of the division is as follows. There's no abstentions, 91 voted against, and 248 voted in favour, and the motion as amended is accordingly agreed to.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Honourable members,
Free Palestine! From the river to the Palestine
will be free.
Free Palestine!
Order. Thank you. Thank you, honourable members. Order.
Free Palestine.
Now move on to the next item.
Free Palestine.
Mute the platform, please.
From the river to the sea.
Order, honourable members. We now come to motions without notice.
Palestine.
We come to motions without notice. Does any member of the ANC wish to give a motion without notice?
Thank you, House Chair.
From the river to the sea.
Order, honourable members. Order.
All right, let's try then to continue with our discussion as we're watching there in Parliament, 91 against, 241 voting in favour. But let's get more reaction now and continue our conversation with Professor Garth le Pere from the University of Pretoria, who is also a Senior Associate at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, and Philani Mthembu, Executive Director at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Let me thank you both for your patience as we were watching what is happening in Parliament this afternoon. Prof, I'm going to stick with you. And of course, what is also being talked about in Parliament and considered this evening was also the cutting of ties with Israel completely, as the EFF had moved in their motion. And really, you were giving us an account of what you witnessed on the ground. And you and I have spoken even about this before when you said that it's time to really consider the cutting off of ties. And I suppose that this motion would have your backing.
Well, I was trying to make the point that there are contextual considerations that are quite important here. 75 years of occupation, 17 years of air, land, and sea blockade of the Gaza. And it's very important to put, the sort of the geographic land and the Gaza in some kind of perspective. The Gaza Strip is 365 square kilometers, in which 2.3 million Palestinians live. The West Bank is just under 6,000 square kilometers, occupied by 2.7 million Palestinians. Now here's the perspective. The Kruger Park is 19,000 square kilometers, which means that the Gaza Strip is 50 times smaller than the Kruger Park. The West Bank is 3 times smaller than the Kruger Park. So these population densities, I think, reflect, the brutality of occupation in a way that really makes the lives of Palestinians untenable. And this is where I come in, you see, because the entire process to try and find some kind of lasting solution has been undermined by Israel. You can go to the 1993 Madrid conference, which tried to revive the peace process. The 1989 Madrid conference, the 1993 Oslo Accords, which tried to hammer out a lasting agreement and settlement between Israel and the PLO on the one hand, and then also to establish the Palestinian National Authority on the other. I think the embers of those initiatives died because of Israeli obstructionism, to the point where I think that negotiations to end this conflict are now academic, because the facts of the ground have changed incontrovertibly to the point where a two-stage solution just does not make sense, on the one hand. On the other hand, I think the Israeli government, successive Israeli governments, ending up with Netanyahu, have shown a disdain, an entire disdain for any kind of compromise, territorial compromise, that would make possible some kind of lasting settlement, especially, the establishment of a state of Palestine on the basis of the 73 borders. So, the facts of the ground have changed to the extent where it will be very difficult to hammer out a lasting solution. I understand the imperative of a ceasefire to stop this bloodletting. It is really a human tragedy. It is almost genocidal, in its implications. 13,300 people killed so far, 25,000 tons of, explosive ordnance dropped only on the Gaza. That's the equivalent of 2 nuclear bombs on a city the size of London.
All right.
So, how can you maintain relations with a country, relations that are meant to be informed, by good faith, where, there is a immunity and impunity, aided and abetted, I might add, by the West, and especially by the United States, and in Europe, where there are very powerful Israeli lobbies.
And Philani, I wonder then, because, we, as listening to Prof right now, there are, of course, some of the views that we heard in Parliament and even outside of Parliament of those who are saying that by cutting off all ties, South Africa is putting itself in a position that is an unenviable, according to some, but others are saying that we should be keeping relations open here to be able to, negotiate and make sure that we do play a kind of mediator role. Is there still time to do that?
So I said earlier, what this also shows is the limitations of diplomacy. I think essentially what South Africa is saying is that they have tried for many, many years to advocate for this two-state solution, but also to ensure that existing resolutions of the United Nations are actually adhered to by the State of Israel. And so it's quite clear that South Africa is basically saying, having already downgraded its embassy, having already recalled its diplomats in Israel, I think that itself was a very clear message of what is to come. But I don't think this is where it ends. It's not just a matter of cutting relations. I think if South Africa maintains a position of solidarity with Palestine, it remains committed to a two-state solution. And therefore, what we're likely to see is a much more proactive and even activist foreign policy on this matter. I think South Africa is definitely going to take this matter much more aggressively within the African Union, within the United Nations, within the BRICS, and all fora that it is participating in. So it's not just a matter of closing embassies, both Israeli embassy in South Africa and ours in Israel, but it's a matter of how do you keep the world's attention on this matter and bring about a realistic, discussions closer to, of course, a ceasefire that's been called for, but also how do you begin to bring about this two-state solution when the reality on the ground has made it much more difficult, than when we started talking about a two-state solution.
And do you think then, very briefly, especially looking at that BRICS Plus meeting, extraordinary meeting that was taking place today, do you think this is also a test of the unity in that particular regard? Do you think that we will see a united, a joint statement, particularly on this crisis, given what you've just said about what we're seeing unfolding in Parliament?
Well, you've got high-level representation within that meeting. I think it's just India which has sent its foreign minister, but who is also a highly respected official within the Indian government. Of course, we know India has a different position on this under the current government. But, the fact that the BRICS have expanded and included countries like Egypt, countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran, means that the issue of Palestine will be more elevated within the BRICS. And therefore, you've got more countries within the grouping which are certainly committed to a two-state solution, but who also feel that existing efforts towards that two-state solution, which have been led by the United States, have essentially failed. And I think what you now need is a completely different approach than what has already been tried. I mean, this is what has got us this far, and clearly there has been failure in existing efforts.
And Prof, very briefly then, do you agree with that?
Well, yes and no. I do think, that these other avenues are quite important insofar as, it does sort of keep the opportunities for a pragmatic approach to diplomacy quite alive. But I still maintain, that there is a moral imperative. There is a moral imperative that requires a position that, how do I put this quite delicately, that takes on the Zionist absolutism that defines this occupation, and the importance of Palestinian nationalism. There has to be some kind of compromise there, because 75 years of these contextual considerations that I talked about really provide a profound moral and ethical basis not to have relations with Israel. Simply procedural, they are pragmatic. South Africa keeps its voice alive. But I think, South Africa would send a very powerful message if it broke off relations with Israel completely, as has Bolivia.
All right, let me thank you both for your time, and really thank you for your patience as well. I know we've had to start and stop our conversation for quite some time, especially given what was happening in Parliament, but I do appreciate your patience and your insights this afternoon. That was Professor Garth le Pere from the University of Pretoria, who's also a senior associate at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, as well as Philani Mthembu, Executive Director at the Institute for Global Dialogue.